Right, we'd like to start our next session with Brandon. He's going to be leading you through a lot of teaching and then for you to do a lot of work within your collaboratives for this morning to keep progressing. So thank you, Brandon.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I want to assure you that it's not a lot of teaching. It's just a little bit of teaching. On our agenda for today, we have really quite an extended period of time this morning to be together as teams and to think about our projects. And we know that you all have asked for time to be together, and so we wanted to honor that. And I think at this point in collaboratives, it's time to start reflecting on where we go from here. And part of any collaborative is the development of something we call a change package. And that is a set of materials that can be taken and given to others who want to accomplish the same things that you have set out to accomplish. And so the balance of our talk really is to get into that, to think about what a change package is, and then to get into the work of beginning crafting the change packages for each of your teams. And I think it'll build on what we started to talk about yesterday. I hope you all came prepared, having a good sleep, integrating all of the good work that you did yesterday, because you'll be drawing on that during the balance. So we'll go through that, what a change package is, and then just real briefly, and then we'll talk about developing the elements there. Okay. So just real simply, I mean, if I just had to boil it down, a change package is just a simple set of ideas that are known to produce a desired outcome or a desired result from a process or a system, right? So there are things that we know work, right? And that's what we want to do is gather those together in a way that is easy to interpret and easy to pass on to others, okay? So a lot of times what a change package will do is it describes the future state, right? But the other real big thing that it does is it tells us how to get there. It gives us that information there. Okay? And where it begins is with our theory. So I think everybody's got a copy of their driver diagram, is that right, from yesterday? We hope. You're gonna need that. So if you don't have it, we're going to work on getting it for you, or encouraging you to find it somehow. But the idea here with a change package is we start off 9 months ago, 10 months ago with a theory of change. Right? We sat together at Learning Session 1, and we spent a lot of time getting real specific about what it was we wanted to accomplish, and then thinking through all of the things that we needed to do in order to accomplish that. In essence, 9 or 10 months ago, back in May of 2012, we were laying down a roadmap for ourselves. We were saying, this is what we believe will work to get us to the future state. Well, now we're coming up towards the end of the campaign. We've still got a few months left, but this is our last opportunity to be together in a learning session environment. And we're now starting to reflect back on what have we learned. So we had this theory, we didn't have any evidence that it would work, right? We just heard from Ian, right, who told us that one of the big learnings over the last year has been about failure and about how things that we expected would work didn't work. And that's really important, right? Well, that means that at this moment, our driver diagrams, our articulation of theory is a little bit out of date, right? It needs to be updated based on all the learning that has gone on. And so, we know that of all of the myriad of ideas that we had to begin with, there were some that didn't work right away, and we abandoned them, right? They didn't work. There are some that started to work, but they required adaptation, and we may still be in the process of adapting them and changing what they look like and benefiting from the small tests of change that we're doing. And there are some, for some of you, there are changes that have really excelled. Out of that initial set of ideas, there are changes that have really excelled. For still other groups, there are changes you have discovered along the way that you never anticipated back in May of last year. Things that you hadn't considered, hadn't thought about, despite all of your subject matter knowledge. right? And so now we're getting to a place where we're ready to make these changes permanent, right? And from the perspective of a change package, we're ready to start thinking about those ideas that have really shown some efficacy, that they've been efficacious here. And so we may have started with 10 ideas or 20 ideas or 40 ideas or any number of which, but now we're starting to boil down, right, to a few ideas that are really working well or that we think have real high promise to work well. Right? And the rest of the stuff we're starting to think about eliminating. Right? So the work that we want to do over the next several minutes, probably 15, 20 minutes with our teams, is refine our diagram. We want to go back and revisit, talk about everything that we've learned, all the tests that we've done, and the changes that are ready for implementation, those are the changes that get to stick around. The changes that need further testing, let's hold on to those too. But the things that have been abandoned, the things that you know don't work, the things that don't fit with your theory, it's time to get rid of those. Right? And trying to scratch those off and get rid of those. Because when we pass along the driver diagram to another team, maybe at another hospital, maybe at another DHB or in another country, we want them to benefit from everything that we've done thus far. Okay? So your theory, of course, is the guide. Right? And so what we're hoping to create with a change package is a guide that takes the next group to where you are much faster. Right? So we want them to be able to accomplish what's taken you 10 months, give them that starting point. So they don't have to start where you started 10 months ago. They get to start where you are now. Okay? And so the theory helps them to do that. The theory helps them to say, well, if you do these things on step 1, you're going to get the outcome of interest. If you do these things after step 2, it's not going to work. Right? So be aware of that. Those are the kind of things that we want to communicate. Okay? So this is what we want you to do, is to make those annotations, to circle the things that work, to get rid of the things that don't work. And the last thing I want to say about this before I turn you loose is that update the drivers as well. As much as you've learned about changes, you may also have learned about levers. You may have learned about places in the system that you need to push on in order to get the outcome of interest that weren't there back in May of last year. Right? You may also have identified things that aren't working. We've pushed on them a lot and we didn't get the result we're interested in. Maybe that's not a lever. We thought it was, but maybe it's not. So update that part of your theory as well. Okay? So we're going to leave you with this, and we're going to come back in about 15, 20 minutes, and we're going to get into the next stage of change package development there. Okay? But leave you with this quote by Isaac Newton. It was found in his letters, and it says, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. I think you all right now are engaging in the work of becoming giants. Right? What we want is for people in the future to be able to take the work that you're doing right now and stand on it. We want them to be able to actually go further faster as a result of the work that you're doing. And so I don't want to stop the conversations. I want to keep them rolling. We have 4 more activities associated with the development of a change package to accomplish over the next hour and a half or so. And so we are going to continue the conversations with some slightly different prompts that will guide us through that when you come back from tea break. But if you need more time to consider the revision of the driver diagram, take it, because I think it's an incredibly valuable activity to do. So I think we started to talk about this yesterday. One of the common mistakes of thinking about change is thinking of it only as a technical issue, or for us as a sort of clinical pathway issue. And I think what we started to talk about with the use of the implementation checklist yesterday was that really there are other things that have to change alongside in order to achieve sustainability. And as we contemplate the building of change packages, our next step, once we've started to identify the changes that we think ought to be a part of it, is to work through them. And so we've actually put fresh copies of the checklist there at each of the tables. And yesterday you had an opportunity to focus on one change idea that you would look to put through the implementation checklist. But several teams had more than one idea that were ready for that, and so we wanted to give you more time to continue those conversations. Now, you could also use this time to continue the previous conversation around refining your driver diagram if those conversations didn't feel complete. But we're going to put you right back into your teams and opportunities to continue working together, and this is the next step in that process. So we'll gather back here in about 15 minutes, and then we'll move to the third step in change package development. All right? Okay. So did that 20 minutes go by very quickly? All right. Let me just do a quick check with folks in terms of your process. Have you felt like you've been able to make some good progress on the two activities thus far, the sort of redevelopment of the driver diagram and the population of the implementation checklist for a couple of changes? Is that going well? Do you feel like you need more time with that? You need another hour? Is that what I heard? All right. Need more time. All right. Well, for those who are ready to transition, I'm going to put up the next breakout slide, and you'll see again it is building on what we started to talk about yesterday as far as messaging for change. But if you're not ready for it, then just get to it as you can. But really what we want to focus on is the psychology of change, right? So we have these ideas that we think really could transform care. We know the processes that need to change alongside of them in order to create a semblance of sustainability. Well, how are we going to go about messaging it? And who are we going to get to be our champions to help us get commitment to the change? Well, I want you to start considering that conversation for the changes that you believe are ready for implementation. And again, a special note here, I want you to talk about your process of decision making and planning, and maybe make a note about that, because in any future change package you develop, what you're about to go through is often lost, right? A lot of times we talk about it as tacit knowledge. It's knowledge that people have but never is articulated or explicated in any sort of formal way. But if you were to coach another team to do what you're doing or attempting to do, this is the type of knowledge that would be absolutely invaluable to them. And so as you go through these conversations, I want you to take notes on the types of issues that come up. What are the things that you're considering? Who are the types of people that you're targeting in order to champion this work and so forth? Because those are the soft things that often get lost when we try to pass along the hard technical knowledge. And we don't want to lose those things. So if you're ready for it, go ahead and dive into these conversations. If you're not, spend the time you need to continue where you are. But don't lose sight of this. We do know that these conversations could go on all day, but we want to have you touch on at least each of these things in turn, with the realization that we'll need more time later this week, next week, in the coming weeks ahead to really flesh this out completely. All right. So I'll leave you with that and just keep it going. Let's pause our conversations for a second. I just want to do just a real brief check-in with everybody, just to hear maybe from one or two teams how far you've gotten with the first three activities in terms of driver diagram, implementation checklist, and now sort of messaging the improvement that you want to make permanent. So have teams had a chance to make it through each of those three conversations? I know I've just come from the Delirium team. They definitely have. Where are other teams? How about over here? Not quite here yet. Okay. All right. Anybody else not quite here yet? Not there yet. Okay. All right. Time is fleeing away from us quickly. I'm trying to decide what to do here. Would you prefer to carry on your conversations? No, you want to move forward? Yeah, okay. All right, well in that case, what we want to talk about next is the how-to portion, right? So frequently change packages come with something called a how-to guide. And the how-to guide is really the step-by-step actions that need to be taken by a team that wants to replicate the transformation that you are trying to create or that you have created. And the real, very simple example that I can give to you comes from work in ICUs around the use of ventilators and the problem of ventilator-associated pneumonias. And ventilator-associated pneumonias, as you know, is sort of a big problem. Well, there's a whole bundle of things that you can do to eliminate or prevent ventilator-associated pneumonias, and we know that, and we have good research around that. And one of the ideas that is necessary is this idea of getting the angle of the bed at 30 degrees or above, right? Well, how do you do that? So how would you guide people to do that? Well, you might say that the concept, the underlying idea is the angle of the bed. How you accomplish that can be done in several different ways. And a how-to guide tries to articulate that, or at least tries to articulate the way that you went about accomplishing the change effort. And so for some hospitals, it could be something as simple as a protractor that is attached to a piece of string on the side of the bed. For other hospitals, it's a piece of tape on the wall. If the bed drops below the tape, then we know that we're less than 30 degrees. For others, it is, for people who have a lot of extra money lying around, they're going to buy new beds that have special settings that allow them to do that. And for others, it's a piece of cardboard that's cut at a 30-degree angle so they can measure the angle of the bed just by holding it up. So these are different ways of accomplishing the same change, right? And teams that have gone about doing that have then written up how-to guides. We did it by using a protractor. We did it by buying new beds and so forth. Well, what we want to know for you is, for each of these changes, how did you do it? So how did you go about making it permanent? And so the next next breakout, if you're ready for it, or if you want to move on to a different conversation, or what are the critical steps? Okay, to speed another group's learning. So what are the critical steps that they need to take? What are the individual cycles or things they need to put in place in order to accomplish the change that you're recommending? Prem just came up and asked me a question about the use of the implementation checklist. And he was saying, is it for a component of a process, or is it for the whole process? And they were thinking around the idea of the goal discharge date. Well, the Transitions of Care team has actually invented an entire process in order to reliably get a goal discharge date in place. Well, that whole process is the how-to guide. It's the step-by-step. This is what has to be done at each point in time in order to accomplish the transformation, which is the delivery of that date. Right? And that's what we want to get to there. So can we document that process for each of those things? So we'll let you dive into that, and then we're going to come back together one more time and have one more breakout session before we move on to the next bit of content. Okay? All right. Okay. We're going to transition you one last time here. Chances are you're not even close to finishing this conversation. That's okay. I think one of the things we'll try to do, we will do, is we're going to make these slides available, and I would encourage you to continue the conversations using the slides in your team meetings going forward, if they're useful to you, and pick the conversation that makes the most sense for where you are as a group. But our last little breakout here, and the last thing that we want to give to anybody who might take our work forward, is a sense of measurement. And so we have worked real hard with each of the teams to develop a local set of measures, right? And we've learned a lot along the way. We heard yesterday from the cellulitis team, for example, that maybe we didn't have the right measures or we didn't have the right definitions when we first got started. And that was a real important piece of learning for us. Well, teams that are going to come next are going to need your help with this. And they're going to need help along two different streams, I would say. One is the measures that flow naturally from the system. So in a little while, I'm going to show you the dashboard for the whole campaign, and we'll talk about measures that flow naturally from the system. And each of you has some of those already. And this is data that is normally collected by the health system that we can mine to help us understand the improvement journey that we're on. But there are also things that you have decided to collect independently, to do your own audit, to go digging for and to find that can help inform your journey. And those are the things that are really important for people who will come later to know what they are, right? So what are you doing just at your team level? What data are you using, on a day-to-day basis? Well, anybody who comes next is going to want to know what that is, and they're going to want to know how to collect that and so forth. So what I want you to do for the next maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and this would be hopefully relatively easy because you've done it over the last 9 months, is just quickly describe a family of measures that is useful for your project, that if somebody else were to try and replicate your project, you'd like them to take those measures on board as well to inform the improvement journey. So we'll do that, we'll do a bit of wrap up, and then we're going to transition actually to a brief talk on monitoring and sustainability in the lead up to lunch there, which is coming in a very few short minutes. So, all right, let's come back together. So just want to wrap us up and then take us into a talk on monitoring here, but at this point, I think in terms of the development of a change package, we have several things at least under development or in initial conversations. There's probably more work that will need to be done in the weeks and months ahead, but big part of this last couple 2.5 hours or so has been to focus on getting a change package that reflects these things. It reflects a specific aim, which all of you have as program teams. That has a refined theory of change, and I think a lot of you are ready to take that conversation even deeper, that you want to spend more time on that, and I probably moved you off of it too soon. We have the critical ideas and concepts that will be necessary to spread interventions. Those are some of the things we talked about today. The how-to guides and the recommended measurement system are starting to take shape. I don't think that in a single morning like this morning that we would be able to completely finish talking through all of those topics, but I think it is valuable to start thinking about our projects as being production vessels for knowledge that can be taken elsewhere. And really a change package is how we do that. And so it begins to consolidate all of the learning that has taken place. And so hopefully we'll plan more time for that, and the IAs and project managers and Diana and David and team will continue to support you in the development of these. But I would love, by the time we get together to celebrate in June, if we really had some change packages that were close to or had achieved fruition, and that would be really an exciting thing to have at our disposal and to be able to share with the world. So, any final questions or thoughts on that? I'm going to switch PowerPoint presentation, but any thoughts or questions or feedback that people want to offer?
Brandon, do you want to just mention the claim?
Would you like to?
I'd love to. We actually put 3 of these on the back table. They've all gone, so I assume they're in the room somewhere, are they? Have people seen them? Yeah. So what these are, courtesy of Suzanne Profit and many, many hours of work, is a how-to guide for what they've done in the collab work. So it's exactly the same sort of collaborative methodology as us and change packages and things. So we thought that you might like to have a look at those, and that's what Brandon's talking about, is that what ideally we'd like to have is for each of your change packages is we'll produce a little booklet like this so that you can hand this around the world when you become famous, and you'll be on your world circuit of speaking circuit, which many of you have started already, and you can continue on, and you won't need to do a day's work after this because you be paid so much. So anyway, that's absolute dribble, but that's where you're heading if you produce one of these.
Brilliant. And I do believe that the CLAB team is also going to be posting that online. So there'll be digital copies available, and people can get it in PDF and look at it sort of at a more leisurely pace, since we only have got the one copy left in the room here at the moment. Right. Well, for the next 10 minutes, we're going to go quickly through this, but I want to talk about measuring for sustainability and moving towards monitoring. And I think it's important to get at this point in time a reflection on measurement and the phases of improvement and the improvement journey that you have been working through. And so I'm just going to briefly introduce sort of the concept to you, and then we can pause, ask questions and so forth, and we'll do this quickly just before lunch. So I guess Where we began at the beginning of the collaborative was really at a baseline stage. Most of us were in a situation where we either had no baseline data or we had some baseline data that had flowed to us from the system, and we used that information to indicate to us where improvement was needed. So we selected these projects because we felt like, hey, you know, we have either a problem in place here or there's something we could be doing a lot better on behalf of patients. And here's an indication of that. Here's an example of a control chart. Control chart is just a sort of a fancy line graph that gives us a special ability to interpret data and understand all the ups and downs that occur in data. And in this period, we can see that sort of the predicted level of performance for this measure, and pick the measure of your choice. This is just the conceptual diagram here, but is performing at just under 50%. And we might decide as a team, well, you know, that's not good enough. We have a need for an improvement project here. And so we're going to go ahead and transition ourselves into an improvement period. And we're going to spend some time working really hard, maybe on a collaborative team like this one. Right? And we're going to work hard over several days or several months to rapidly improve performance. Okay? And so what you'll notice about this graph right here is a few different things. One is I've annotated where the baseline is, so we can always see into the future where we had the indication for need and where the work began in earnest to create transformation. The other thing you'll notice is right now I'm measuring on a daily basis. So I'm looking at this particular measure every day. Right? I know not all of us look at measures every day, but it is possible to do so in some circumstances. And that's going to become important when we get to the monitoring function. Okay? So I guess what's the next thing that happens? So you see this improvement, you see it happening, it's going up. What's the next decision we have to make? Yeah, somebody just said it over here. Have we achieved? Have we achieved anything? Well, achievement is really a comparison, right? It's a comparison to a specification of some kind. So we engage in improvement in order to achieve something, right? Now, maybe we wanted to get to 85% and maybe we only got to 70%. We still will have improved, but we might not have achieved, right? And so that's an important distinction, that at some point this idea of comparison enters our conversation, right? Hopefully, if we're in a real sort of progressive culture, we're not getting judged against achieving a particular target or being blamed for not doing that. That if we were to improve right up to 84%, we'd still be patted on the back for doing a great job. So achievement there is that specification, is that point where we say, yeah, we've got the level of performance that we're interested in. Right? The next thing that we're interested in on the improvement journey is going to be what? Well, we've achieved. Yeah. Do we sustain, right? So the next thing we're going to look at is this idea of sustainability. And the way that we do that is we continue to look at the data over time and make sure that it continues at the level of achievement that we're interested in, right? So all of this makes real good sense to you, I'm sure, in your minds, and this is just a visual representation of that. Now you'll notice a couple of things that I've noted on here. One, I've still got the baseline annotated, and two, now you'll see that these dotted lines have disappeared, right? During the time that we were improving, there's no more dotted lines. And basically what I'm communicating to anybody who's familiar with control charts is this is a situation where performance was unpredictable. It was changing almost on a daily basis. And there wasn't any way to predict that. And so as a result, we don't have those dotted lines or control limits around the data. During the period of sustainability, the data became predictable again, right? And so we get to put these dotted lines back on the graph, and we have some sense of what we would expect from the future. Okay? Now, a key question that we have to identify when we achieve sustained performance is when have we achieved? How much data do we need to see before we would agree that we have sustained improvement? And I think this is where there is a little bit of art that comes with the science. Right? So the person who invented this way of looking at data, his name was Walter Schuhart, and he argued that we need about 20 to 30 subgroups in order to achieve a level where we would be able to understand control, or in our case, understand sustainability during a new time period. Now, a subgroup is, in this case, a day. So I'd need 20 days worth of data. Right? Now, that poses a real unique problem when it comes to healthcare, because most of our data does not come to us daily. Most of the way that our data systems are set up is to provide us with monthly data. And that means that we need almost 2 years worth of data before we'd say that we had sustained performance improvement. And most of us would agree that we don't need that long to see that. So we have to negotiate that. And I would argue probably that anywhere from 9 to 12 data points when we're looking at data monthly would be helpful for understanding whether or not we have sustained performance. And that's, if we're looking at monthly data, that's up to a year's worth of data there. Okay? Now, once we have decided that we have a sustained level of performance, then we can start to say, you know what? This thing is functioning on its own. We believe that it will continue to function at the level of interest. Now we want to move into the next phase, which is monitoring. And there's a couple of things that you'll notice now. One is I've switched from looking at the data every day to now looking at it once a week. Right? And I do that for about as long as I looked at it every day. So here we've got about 60 data points. So that's about 2 months worth of data looked at daily. And here I've got about 8 or 9 weeks, which again is about another 2 months worth of data looked at weekly. Looking at the same measure, and I'm looking to see, I'm just now backing off. I'm doing a little bit less work when it comes to measurement and analysis, but I'm still paying attention to find out if I'm losing any of the gains, if I'm losing any of the hard work that we did to achieve, right? And if I'm not, then I want to go ahead and say, okay, well, let's go ahead and back off. So from here, from week, I go to month, and now we're looking at about 4 or 5 months worth of data there at the end of the chart that help us to see whether we continue to perform at the level of interest. Now, if I did that, and suddenly instead of this picture, I saw this picture, I would have an indication by looking at the monthly data that something had gone wrong. Right? Well, that's really kind of hard to see. I see some special cause variations, some things that are out of the ordinary or unexpected, not what I would expect to see if we continued to achieve. So I might want to zoom in on just that part of the data. So I've just cut off the data starting here and looked forward. And now I'm zooming in, and what you can see is there's 2 areas of interest. So when I backed off to monitoring, one is that I get information that tells me where I actually got better than I expected to be, right? And I might want to learn from that. There might be some really wonderful bright spots, as Dan Heath calls them, right? Which are real wonderful things I want to learn about. But maybe more important to me is the fact that I had been performing at the level of interest for quite a long time, and now it's slipped away. I slipped underneath the achievement specification. More importantly, I slipped out of control. I'm no longer getting the performance that I'm interested in. And so now I have a decision to make as to what to do. So if I'm a leader who's monitoring this data, I have to decide, how do I investigate it? One way is to go back to looking at the data more frequently. So if I've been looking at it on a monthly basis for a few months, I might decide to go back to weekly or daily data for a period of time to try to learn how performance has changed. Okay? And that would be important to me because I want to make sure that we don't lose the ground that we have gained, that we don't let that slip away. And the reason that this is a real critical issue, and I think I mentioned this yesterday, is because man-made systems fall apart, right? They fall apart. That they always will. And there's several reasons for that. One is that the external environment is always changing around us. So the pressures exerted on our system are constantly changing. And our internal systems are also changing around us, right? So while we did this work over the last year, in the next year, other work is going to come along that's going to focus on different resources and is going to have unintended consequences that will ripple through the system. And if I go to a monitoring function, I can detect when those unintended consequences are going to occur. and I can do so while balancing the resources it takes to do the measurement and to look at the analysis. So rather than look every day, which might require a lot of time, I can look once a month, and I can still see into my system and see when my system is starting to fall apart and take corrective action. Put a team together, get back on, and do some continuous improvement, right? Just sort of like on the dashboard on my car, right? I don't need to look at the fuel gauge every day if I'm driving relatively short distances, but I need to pay attention once a week or once a month or whatever, right? Okay? So it helps me to see that happen. So we have this monitoring function going on right now within our campaign. We have a dashboard that, for the most part, serves in a monitoring function. And we have all of these wonderful measures that you can see here. We have admissions to the hospital. We have a readmission rate. We've got our days between dot days, right? Which is, lovely to see that going up there. I don't know if that's the most up-to-date day, but we're still on our way up, which is good to hear, looking at dot for confirmation. We have the EC presentations, occupancy, and average length of stay. Well, what's real interesting is all of these projects, you probably don't see your measures up here, right? These are for the whole system, right? But all of the work that you're doing, we have a strong degree of belief has the ability to impact on these things, right? And so where we start to see process improvement within your projects, there is a knock-on effect that lags a little bit behind where we start to see an impact on these measures. So, for example, the CAM tool, right? We're starting to use the CAM tool reliably in one ward, is that right? Right? And the idea is now we would love to spread it to every ward. That'd be wonderful if everybody was using it. Well, we think that we have a real strong theory that the use of the CAM tool predicts when people are going to have delirium and helps us to take corrective action, which is going to prevent things like inpatient falls, right? Well, where is that ultimately going to impact when every patient is being assessed for that? Probably over here in length of stay. So somebody who falls down is likely to stay longer in a hospital. Well, once every patient is getting that tool in place, and we're detecting delirium sooner and taking corrective action and preventing those falls, we're likely to see a lagging effect in length of stay, right? And so we're watching that right now, and as we get to a place of implementation, and implementation across the whole system, then we're going to pay real close attention to length of stay and see if we start to see an impact there, right? One of the things that has been happening as we've watched is in the last couple of months, we've actually seen some things that are really out of the ordinary. We don't have good explanation for them right now, but they are happening, right? The one thing is we've seen an out-of-the-ordinary decrease in presentations to the EC. We've also seen an out-of-the-ordinary decrease in occupancy in the hospital, right? We don't have a good explanation for that. And some people might say, well, it's just because we've had a real extraordinary summer. That might be part of the case, but unfortunately, this data goes back several years, and it incorporates several cycles of summer, right? And so the growth trajectory that we would expect is accounted for. So it'd have to be a real extraordinary summer for us to not detect this. And so something else is going on, and we want to learn from that. That's something we would go out and try to learn from. And so we're going to keep watching this as a campaign well beyond the July deadline to start look for the knock-on or lagging effects of all the work that we're about to make permanent as a result of the campaign. And that's how that sort of works there. But that's how we kind of use data to go through the improvement journey, right? Right from the sort of front line, getting the baseline data to indicate where improvement is needed, all the way to kind of the macro level of seeing dramatic impacts in what's happening for the whole system. So, any questions on that? If you say no, you get to go to lunch. Yeah. All right. We're going to go to lunch, and when we come back, we're going to get into sort of next steps and our planning for the next action period.